Hello, let's talk about orange marmalade. So, to those unfamiliar with marmalade, it might be odd for this to be considered a traditional Scottish food item. However, it has been kicking around these parts since at least 1730, when it was included in Mrs. McClintock's recipe book, and then the main fame for marmalade in Scotland comes from the 1760s when Keelers, I think that's how you say it, of Dundee started selling it. And to be fair, even they got the idea from Spanish and Portuguese merchants who've been doing it since the 15th century. And another reason is you just throw in a nice history of trying to avoid sugar taxes. And that means for some reason, marmalade season is now in the cold winter months. I know it's March, but it's still like -2 outside just now. And I was essentially asked by a family member to make it for them since I give homemade jams and chutneys at Christmas. I have been unemployed for 2.5 years. I needed some hobbies. So for this recipe, there's different sources and different places and different quantities. The recipe I used is the following one. It did seem to kind of give just the right amount that I needed. I understand everything might be ratios and can be balanced, but here's what I went for. It was 1.3 kilograms of Seville oranges, 2 lemons, which you just use the juice of. If you're wondering, the juice helps make the marmalade more acidic, so it sets better and allows the natural pectins to work their magic. Without it, the pectins might not set as easily. And main ingredient, 2.6 kilograms of granulated sugar. I'll put in the description what these are in Imperial. What this recipe didn't mention was jars, lots and lots of jars. These are leftover chutney ones, hence their kind of elongated shape, but they do the job. I needed at least 5 before I gave up and just filled a massive reusable jar I have. What's also handy is this, a metal pouring funnel, because trying to squeeze all the jam into this tiny little hole is a nightmare, but you can just dump it all on the top here and it funnels its way in. If you try and put it in just using a spoon, you're going to have a bad time, so I recommend a metal pouring funnel. This one, £7-8 or something. It's been one of the best purchases I've made. And I went and got it off the cupboard, this pan. Essentially you need some places call it like a preserving pan or whatever, but basically you're looking for a pan with lots of surface area so that more liquid can evaporate off and allow it to turn into jam. So there's no prep work involved in this recipe, because you need to do a very strange thing in the beginning, and that's put all the oranges and the lemon juice in a large preserving pan, and you're looking to cover it with about 2 litres, 4 pints of water. If it doesn't cover it, try and use a smaller pan at this point. If you still can't get it covered, feel free to weigh it down with some kind of heat-proof plate or bowl. I was able to squeeze them all in at the beginning, but then eventually I did have to stick a microwavable heat-proof bowl in there to get the job done. You're just looking to bring everything to the boil, turn the heat down and cover and simmer for, I went for 1 hour, until the peel can be easily pierced with a fork, and then it's softened. Some recipes have said up to 4 hours, 2 hours. You wouldn't go for 4 hours. I mean, I've only made it once. I'm not exactly an expert here, but 1 hour just seemed to do the job and was plenty. This is where I think you have to use your own judgment and intuition, which I always talk about. Next, you're looking to pour off the cooking liquid from the oranges. Keep it. I say pour it off, I don't mean pour it down the sink, I mean pour it into a jug or a bowl or a pot where you can reuse it, because that's one of your main ingredients right there. Put the oranges into a bowl, allow them to cool down to the point where you can start to handle them. As soon as you can handle them, then it's time to cut the oranges in half, scoop everything out to the best of your ability. Again, just scoop that into a bowl, we're going to use it. Then we're going to combine the orange liquid, which we kept, and all the piths and pits and flesh of the oranges is going to be dumped into that pot. We're going to bring it back up to temperature and boil it for 5 to 6 minutes, just to get more of the pectin flavours and juices and everything out of there. That way we're not wasting anything.
And forgive the sudden cut to voiceover, but I forgot to talk about the fact you need to cut all of the peel into little pieces. It's as simple as it sounds, just cut it into small chunks, because you're going to need to put that into the marmalade. Forgot to say that.
Then just strain and filter this liquid through a sieve or a filter or whatever technique you want to use. I just used a metal one, as you can see here. Did the job. Some people like to use cloths, but the metal one was easier in my opinion. I didn't get any chunks going through it. Now the next stage is putting all the ingredients together. Whenever you're making jam, chutneys, marmalades, Guides caution against trying to cook too much at once, because you're not going to get the temperature consistent and get it to set. So the guide that I used for this marmalade said to do it twice. Keep half the liquid, half the ingredients, put them in, so on and so forth. I did it at the same time and used 2 pots because I'm a rebel, and it just seemed more efficient, as you'll be able to see in the clips that I'm now showing. Divide the liquid into 2, put half the sugar in one, half the sugar in the other. I know it looks like quite a lot. I mean, mine was basically bursting out the top of the liquid as a little mountain, but just keep stirring it until it dissolves, and once it dissolves, turn the heat up, bring to the boil and bubble rapidly for like anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes. You're just looking for a setting point to be reached where it's turned into a marmalade. You can test the old setting technique by using the frozen plate. Get a small plate or saucer, put it in the freezer or fridge if that's all you have, pull a little bit of the jam out, put it on the plate and look for it to wrinkle and set and start to be solid. You're not looking for it to be like rigid, then you might be overcooking it. It is going to continue to set in the jars, so don't feel like you have to get it perfect. As long as it looks like it's starting to solidify on that frozen or cold plate, then you're in business. Once you feel that point's been reached, this is your opportunity to turn the heat off and try and scoop off as much of that scum, that will be scum unfortunately, on top of both the pots. Just pour that down the sink, you don't need it. If you still can't get all of it out, at this point you can add a small knob of butter, my favourite word, into the pots to help get rid of and disperse the final pieces of scum. It's not going to be noticeable in terms of flavour, but if you're vegan and you don't mind scum, then just don't add the butter. I recommend that you leave the marmalade in the pot, once you've de-scummed it and it's starting to set, in the pot just for another like 10-15 minutes, just until it's a little bit cooler and less likely to scald you. But at this point, you're just looking to put it into the jars. As for the jars, mine were simply washed, soapy water, dried out, and I put them in a low oven, about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, until they were fully dried and cleaned. And I did the same with the lids. I boiled them in some water and put them in the oven to fully dry out. I didn't want to add any moisture to this. I'll put a whole separate guide for sterilising jars in the description as well, if that's something you're unfamiliar with. So how was it for me to actually do? I mean, this was my first time making marmalade. As I said, usually I make chutneys or jams. This was the first time using Seville oranges like this, and it turned out pretty well. It was a very labour-intensive process. It was like, as much as they say, an hour cooking, an hour preparation, whatever, it took me 4 hours. There's a lot of chopping, there was a lot of cutting, there's a lot of getting that fidgety little slimy peel and cutting it into strips, which, while they might look quite big in the video, did reduce as the marmalade was cooking, and go into a smaller scale that actually works for it. So don't stress yourself about trying to cut them too small. But it's really nice to have a recipe that makes use of every piece of the fruit. The peel is in there, the pith and the pits formed part of me boiling it away and getting all the pectin and everything out of it. And these will keep in a dark cupboard for up to a year, and once they're opened, in the fridge for a month. Is the taste for everyone though? I'll be honest and say probably not. It is quite an old-fashioned recipe, and Seville oranges are very, very bitter. It's a flavour that some people really like though, and I didn't mind it. I quite like bitter things. You'd think with all the sugar that went into it, it would be overly sweet, but it's not. And as for my worldwide audience, and there are a lot of you, you can buy preserved Seville oranges in cans, usually. If that's out of season, or if it's too expensive to ship fresh ones over to where you are, the canned ones are available. You can also find someone locally that grows Seville oranges. Despite the name, that doesn't mean they only come from there. I'm sure in Europe it's kind of a designated origin protection thing, but around the world someone can sell Seville oranges and all it is a cross between a pomelo and a mandarin, I believe. And I did find examples of some that were grown in the USA. However, they do seem to be sold out, or a lot more popular than I was anticipating. So you might have to wait until next season in November, when some said they were going to start selling. So, bookmark this for Christmas, and you can see you then. So, thanks for watching, and don't be a stranger.